Though, much can get lost amid the cacophony of perpetual phony outrage, and it can be hard to discern any one bit of outrage from any other, you've probably still noticed over the last few weeks that people on the left are very angry at Florida. And they're always angry at Florida. They're angry mostly that Florida is thriving while they live in gray, dreary cities covered in human feces and used heroin needles. So you can hardly blame them for being a bit envious. But the professed reason for all the anger towards Florida this time in recent days has been a particular piece of legislation called the Parental Rights in Education Bill. Now, even if you don't live in the state, it's worth tracking this story because much can be learned from it, I think, and especially from the reaction to this bill. So the law would bar schools from discussing sexual orientation and gender identity with kids in elementary school. And this has provoked volcanic fury from the left, who have dubbed the legislation the Don't Say Gay bill. They claim that this is, among other things, an attack on free speech. Of course, the idea that adults have the free speech right to have inappropriate sexual conversations with children is the kind of thing that you'd expect only pedophiles and perverts and predators to argue for. And you would be right. And it's easy enough to understand why gender identity shouldn't be discussed in elementary school. In fact, it shouldn't be discussed in any grade at any level because it's an incoherent, made-up concept invented, not coincidentally, by a pedophile mad scientist named John Money, who you're well familiar with if you listen to this show. Gender identity is a religious doctrine. It's part of the left-wing creed. It has no basis in science or reality. Now, if a Christian public school teacher cannot stand in front of his class and declare that Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior, and all students should accept him into their hearts, then a leftist public school teacher should not be able to stand in front of his class and declare that boys can magically become girls if they believe it in their hearts. The left has for years shouted that we must keep religion out of the classrooms, but as it turns out, they only had certain religions in mind, which we've known for a while. But what about sexual orientation? Now, it's at least coherent and factually true to say that a person has sexual urges, which are generally oriented one way or another. In fact, John Money also coined the term sexual orientation, but at least in this case, it's coherent. You understand what's being said. The question, though, is whether a government employee in the government education system would ever have any valid reason to talk to a 9-year-old about sexual urges. The answer to that question, obviously, is no. The left says that not only do these adults have good reason to talk about sexual urges with prepubescent children, but even that the adults, have a right to hold such discussions. To force them to refrain from talking about their sexual urges with children is to persecute them, we're told. Moreover, it deprives the children of something that they need, because children before the age of puberty somehow need to talk about a topic that they fundamentally won't be able to understand and which has nothing to do with any of the academic subjects that they're going to school to learn about. This is absurd for a lot of reasons, but the main one is that it goes the other way around. You aren't depriving children of something they need by refraining from having inappropriate sexual conversations with them in elementary school. You're depriving them of something they need when you do have those conversations. Namely, you're depriving them of the innocence of childhood. Well, one thing I can tell you as a 4-star chef myself, amateur chef, but I consider myself a 4-star chef, your kitchen is not complete without great kitchen knives. And that's why you need Kamikoto. Kamikoto taps into more than 800 years of traditional techniques from Honshu, Japan. Kamikoto also uses steel sourced from mills in Japan, and each blade is crafted using techniques that have been honed and perfected by generations of knife smiths. Each knife comes in a beautiful heavy-duty ash wood box and make sure that the knife is stored safely as well. Each Kamikoto knife goes through a rigorous 19-step process that takes several years from start to finish to complete. Our expert bladesmiths forge and shape raw steel into hardy blades, polishing and sharpening them to an excruciatingly fine edge. Each knife is individually inspected. Kamikoto is so confident that their knives will work for you that each knife comes with a lifetime guarantee. Because of their single bevel edge, Kamikoto knives can achieve an unbelievably sharp edge you just can't get with other knives. They can cut through your ribeye like butter. That is guaranteed. Kamikoto is currently having a massive extended New Year sale, and on top of that sale, you can get an additional $50 off any purchase you make with discount code Matt Walsh. So click the link below or go to kamikoto.com/Matt Walsh and use promo code Matt Walsh to save an extra $50 today. Now, leftists, they actually will openly scoff at the very idea of the innocence of childhood. They don't recognize that there is any innocence of childhood because along with being acolytes of John Money, even if they don't know they're acolytes of him, they're also acolytes of Alfred Kinsey and the other late 19th and early 20th century degenerates who claim that children are sexual from birth. Now, that's false, but it turns out that this was not a description, it was a proscription. Children are not naturally sexual from birth, but these quacks would try to change that. They wanted them to be. And they've been trying to change that fact ever since. And to prevent them from doing so, to prevent the adults from doing that, from sexualizing childhood, that is a personal attack against them, we're told. Which should really tell you something. And so should this. Outrage was renewed over the weekend after a new amendment was added to the bill, which, according to all the headlines, would require schools to, quote, out their students. Now, the idea of outing an elementary school student doesn't even really make any sense to begin with, but the way the headlines are written, it makes it sound like teachers are required to investigate a child's sexual preferences and then set off some kind of alarm, pull an alarm and alert the whole building if a kid turns out to be gay. Yet investigating sexual preferences is exactly the sort of thing that the bill forbids. That's what they're not supposed to be doing. So the framing doesn't really make any sense here. It turns out when critics say outing, what they mean is that schools are required to inform parents. And there's a difference there. So here's the article from The Hill. It says, a new amendment to Florida's Don't Say Gay bill would require schools to inform parents of their children's sexual orientation within 6 weeks of learning that the student isn't straight, NBC affiliate WFLA reported on Monday. The amendment was filed Friday by the bill's co-sponsor, State Representative Joe Harding. The bill, which has gained national attention and pushback, bars educators in Florida from talking about sexual orientation or gender identity in primary schools. Parents would be able to take legal action against school districts that they believe have violated the measure. The original version of the legislation required schools to inform families of their child's LGBTQ plus status, but gave an option for exemption for the outing in cases where educators feared it could lead to abuse, neglect, or abandonment. The amendment offers no such exception. Yes, it offers no such exception because any such exception would guarantee that no school would ever tell any parent anything because they could always simply claim that they fear abuse at home. And this is especially true given that the left considers it abuse if a parent fails to accept that their son is really a girl or that their girl is really, a non-binary pansexual chipmunk or whatever. The point of this amendment is not that schools ought to be digging into a child's personal life and then reporting back to the parents. That's close to the opposite of the point. The point is simply that the schools, that would be the government institutions, should not know more about a child than his own parents do. I have a right to know what my child is doing at school, what he's saying, how he's behaving, how he's, quote, identifying. There should not be any secrets kept between students and teachers. There especially shouldn't be any sexual secrets kept between students and teachers. Only in a culture fully succumbed to madness could that concept be at all controversial. Now, the reason that parents should know this information is that they have a right to know. My child is my child. I have a right to this kind of knowledge about him, especially if it's knowledge that other people have about him. But the other reason is that teachers can't be trusted. And there are a great many examples that could be marshaled to prove this point, but here's just the latest. I'll play for you a local news report out of a California school district about the sleeping arrangements at a recent science camp. Listen.
Micah, the parents tell us that their children came home from camp. They were asking a lot of questions about gender and pronouns. The parents then reached out to the camp director, who told them that counselors, biological males who identify as they, them, are permitted to spend the night in cabins with the young girls. In the parking lot of Weaver Elementary School in Los Alamitos, a group of parents...
No parent should feel the way I feel after knowing what could have happened to my daughter.
...upset by the sleeping arrangements at a school-organized science camp.
I contacted the school and I asked them if they were able to confirm that there was not a man actually sleeping in the same cabin as the girls. They were not able to confirm that.
The parents say their fifth-grade girls told them some of the biologically male counselors at Camp Powell Pally in San Bernardino identified as they, them, and spent 3 nights sleeping in cabins with the young girls.
They're asleep, they use the shower, they go to the restroom.
Camp Pally confirms, per California state law, we place staff in cabins they identify with.
Now, the parents would go on in that clip to stress that they're not accusing the male adults, the teachers, of doing anything. They're just saying that they're uncomfortable with the sleeping arrangements. They're not making any specific accusations. They're not claiming, for example, sexual abuse. But I think that they ought to claim sexual abuse because that is sexual abuse in and of itself. Even if nothing else happened other than what we're being told. For male adults sleeping with 10-year-old girls, that is abusive sexually in and of itself, without the parents knowing. But they can do it because they identify as they, them. And this is supposed to make them less of a threat somehow? By some incoherent grammatical technicality, they discovered the right to have a slumber party with elementary school girls at science camp. The question is whether you trust these sorts of people to have sexual conversations with your children. Do you trust them to have secrets with your children? Do you trust them at all with anything? Well, obviously, you shouldn't. Well, I hope you enjoyed that clip from the Matt Walsh Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right down there so you can stay up to date on all of our future content.